Welcome, everyone, to episode 59 of Underserved. Today, we're featuring Chris Sullivan, Vice President of Product Development at Castellum.ai. Let's get started.
Welcome to this week's edition of Underserved, the podcast for the rest of the tech industry, where we focus on stories of tech industry leaders, their insights, and their lessons learned. And now, your host, Andrew Jelina.
Chris, thank you very much for joining us today on Underserved.
Hey, Andrew. Happy to be here.
So tell us, way back in the day, what got you interested in technology?
I think one of the earliest memories I have is fifth grade computer lab in elementary school. I would help out the lab teacher and, was just kind of the go-to person for the one computer we had in our classrooms. And it ended up kind of migrating into a training opportunity. So I was a teacher's assistant for a little while and actually got to go around the city and teach teachers how to use computers, which was, pretty cool to kind of giving that back to the educators that were educating me. And it's one of those things I just look back on as a awesome experience that I had when I was really young.
Were there any hard cases where people are picking up the mouse and talking into it and you got to really start from ground zero?
Yeah, I don't remember much from elementary school, so I'm happy to just have that one memory. But nowadays, if you try to teach your grandmother how to use a computer, it was probably a pretty similar experience with technology just being new in general, and PCs and personal computing being brand new, and even me having a computer, in my house, an old Mac Performa 575, which was cutting edge at the time. It's hard to adapt to any new technology for anybody at the time.
Well, I do kind of miss the computer lab. Like that was a thing when we were in school. Like, yeah, some people had them at home, but having them at school, and maybe like if you did your work early, you could go work on those. Like it was a privilege. Now these whippersnappers are spoiled. They got like 7 computers strapped to them at any one time.
Yeah, the home computing environment has definitely changed. The computer lab's not dead. I was walking through Somerville couple weeks ago, and I walked by a gaming station that was there. It was just a room full of PCs for gaming, and I remember that was a hot thing when I was younger, and apparently they're still around or being revived.
Everyone playing Doom on the LAN.
Yeah.
Right on. So do you do some more with computers in high school?
Yeah, I went on to computers and technology. One of the things I did in high school was took AP Computer Science, and that was really my first foray into programming. Knocked out the entire book in the first month or two of my junior year of class and handed in all my assignments, and my instructor said, that was 2 years worth of coursework that you just finished. So I spent the remainder of the time debugging my classmates' code and helping them through their assignments, which again, looking back, just absolutely invaluable experience to have, because that's a lot of junior developers that I've hired and brought on board, the ability to read somebody else's code and understand and then go in and fix it when it's broken is just such a critical skill for bug squashing. So another kind of teacher's assistant role, in addition to getting pulled out of class for the computers that were in the classroom to help my teachers kind of fix it when their computers crashed, whatever that was.
So you spent a little time at Wentworth, but decided, nah, I want to do something else.
Yeah, I don't know if it was much of a decision as as my hand was probably forced by life situations. So admittedly, I wasn't the greatest student from an attendance standpoint, and that carried over into college from high school. That was tough for me because I liked the program, that I was in. I really enjoyed it, but ultimately, I think the timing, wasn't great. I don't think taking a year off before going to college was widely accepted as it is nowadays. So yeah, I looked into some of my options were, and I got a flyer in the mail from the Navy about nuclear stuff and SEALs and all the cool things that they throw out in their marketing material. And the selling point was, hey, I got a job. I can get a job when I get out, if I get out, or I can stay in, and I got money for college, and I can go to college while I'm in or after I get out, and I don't have to spend my dad's money to go to school. It's just a great incentive to go into a program like that. I don't think I would have gone in to be frontline infantry or something like that. When I checked the box, it was for nuclear power and Navy SEALs. So that's
All right. So you enlist in the Navy. Like, how did you decide to become a submariner?
Yeah, they hit you up at the recruiting station pretty early on because you have to volunteer for the sub service. So it's an all volunteer service. And they kind of throw the financial incentives out there, which sound like a lot of money to someone who's 18, 19 with a semester of college under my belt. So that kind of got me to check the box. Also, it's just cool, right? You start talking about subs and things, and it's got kind of attraction to it, and that it is such a small community to be a part of and such a different program from the rest of the military. So that's how I ended up getting into that.
But what's it like being underwater for 72 days with no sun?
That was the longest I went without seeing the sun. You get into a bit of a rhythm. You're on an 18-hour day on most of the boats. Some boats, do things a little differently, but it can make a month feel like a month and a half. But you're always busy. There's always stuff to do. I don't want to say you're always tired, but it depends on what's going on, how tired you are. But your first couple of years, your qualifications, and that takes up a lot of time because you support the ship's operations. And then when you're off watch, you're qualifying for your next watch station that you need to support. And so there's always training. There's always tests that, need to be done. There's a limited number of people, a little over, 100 guys. Should I say guys? It was guys when I was in. Now it's men and women on subs. But yeah, 100 people on board, and everybody's got to do 3 or 4 different jobs because there's just not enough people to go around for the amount of work that needs to be done.
Now, I had a misconception. So a nuclear sub doesn't mean, we've got a pile of warheads on it. It means it's actually powered by nuclear power?
Correct, yeah. And this just came up with the AUKUS agreement. I don't know if you saw any of that in the news, but the U.S. sharing its nuclear technology with Australia, and something that hasn't been done in decades. Nuclear power, it is not a weaponization of nuclear systems and whatnot. And nuclear power lets you go out for an unlimited amount of time from a power plant standpoint. You don't need to refuel. You don't need to come up and surface and charge your batteries. Gives you an advantage over the rest of the arena, over the conventional boats that are out there, and you're only limited by food and air.
Yeah, but both of which are critical. So what were you doing in your spare time when you weren't pulling an 18-hour shift?
The shifts themselves were 6 hours a piece that you'd be on watch, and then you'd get off watch and you'd do typically maintenance, and then you're always cleaning, so every sailor has to clean for unlimited amount of time every day, every week. So those were the big activities. But yeah, we would do maintenance and training and studying for watch station. But we had some downtime too. So you'd movies were big. The mess deck was multi-purpose place. We did training there. We ate all our meals there. We watched movies there, hung out, play cards. It's kind of the biggest place for people to gather, and it's not much bigger than the room we're in right now.
So you get out and decide, all right, let's use this GI Bill money and put it to work. Where do you go to college?
I got out. I took a job with Brookfield Power as a hydro operator. And, one of my plans when I went into the Navy, I said, hey, if this isn't for me, I've at least got money for college and a guaranteed job when I get out. And the hydro operator was a good job to land. It's a little bit like a Homer Simpson type of job, sitting at a desk and watching your panels, which is great because that's what you do as a nuclear operator in the Navy. But to not have to go, work at a nuke plant and be able to work in renewables, it was nice. And then I did that. And while I was doing that, I said, okay, I want to try to go back and get my degree and use my GI Bill. And you got a limited amount of time to use it. So I enrolled full-time in school. So full-time job and full-time at UMass Lowell. And I did 3 online courses, which end up being more work and harder than the in-person courses. But that was the only way it would kind of fit into my schedule. And took one on-campus class per semester and went year-round, spring, summer, fall, and did some condensed classes in the winter, 2-week courses in the winter to kind of knock out my degree in about 3 years.
You are listening to the Underserved podcast. Underserved is produced by Syrinx, the developer-founded, developer-run software consulting company. For more information, visit syrinx.com. That's SYRINX.com.
So you're doing like a bunch of CS courses?
Yeah, I mean, my major was IT with a business minor, and that was mainly because it was good and geared towards the continuing education program, which kind of gives you a little more flexibility than a typical undergrad, program. But I intentionally loaded my coursework with CS electives so that I would get some more of that kind of formal, CS experience and education that I wanted. I would have gone for CS if I could have, but the program just didn't fit with my schedule. And if you look at the overlap, there's a pretty good overlap there between the CS degree and my degree that I got.
Right on. Now, you're still working at Brookfield Power during this time. Do you kind of figure out like, all right, well, how can I help the Homers of the world do their job better?
Yeah, one thing that the Navy gave me was a lot of operational experience, and there's procedures for everything, and you drill procedures, and there's parts you're expected to memorize, and it's never a wrong answer to go to the book, but just that excellence in operations, particularly in the nuclear Navy, which has a flawless record, really set me up for my professional career after that. Being able to look at operational processes and see where there are deficiencies and lean on my background and my experience to make those things better, translated really well. And while I was training, I saw inefficiencies in the way things were being done. And we were doing written paper logs while we were on shift. And I took the opportunity to create an electronic log database to get the information digitized, but also be able to provide reporting on that. That's not a scanned, handwritten document that, needs to be manually, sent out every day.
And are you working on the systems that actually monitor the hydro and wind as well?
Yeah, so that came a little later. I was doing that while I was training. And then once I qualified, they kind of saw that I had a knack for some of the IT systems that were out there. And they were in the middle of building a new control center, and it needed to be tested and commissioned. And it was a pretty big undertaking for the business to consolidate their control rooms and also work with this vendor. So I got pulled off the desk. So no more Homer Simpson for me. And
Don't!
and I got to work on commissioning this platform and take it through the site acceptance testing and work with the vendor and figure out how do we resolve problems with them quickly? How do we get this project back on track? And then, that went really well and landed me a permanent position managing that control system for the next 5+ years.
But eventually you get restless and want to move on?
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to do was to get into software. And it's funny when I look back and I think about some of the pain points that I had even early on at Brookfield. Pain points in process and the way things are structured with vendors. And it's hard when you have a problem and you can't fix it because it's out of your control. So I started looking into getting into software, and then shortly after that, getting into DevOps and those types of operational philosophies and principles. And yeah, after I left Brookfield, I kind of took a step down. I left there with a number of different versions of my resume because I did, networking and databases and project management. But I took a sysadmin job with a software company that was a reboot. And they were looking for somebody to come in, help manage the Linux environment, stabilize some things, and bring some
At Prism HR?
That was at Prism, yeah.
Are you the build guy there as well?
Yeah, I mean, part of the Linux platform that I was managing had a software component to be released, and it was a multi-day process when I showed up to do releases for a number of different reasons. And that was my first kind of foray into release engineering, and I scripted and automated a lot of processes to speed up that deployment. Got it down to a couple hours across twice the server footprint that was there when I showed up.
My old boss at WebTech Partners, Al Sanclementi, said, everyone should be forced to do a stint in build and release to understand what's involved, how everything has to be checked in and versioned, and how everything has to be rigorous and repeatable, and not just some willy-nilly, I don't know really how we built it and I can't reproduce it. What type of technologies are you working with there? Is it like XML?
Yeah, the tech stack was very interesting, particularly on the part of the platform that I was managing, because it was a startup that got acquired by Prism and small crew, and XML was all the craze at the time. So it was a native XML front end, native XML database, XML everything. Yeah, it was an interesting tech stack.
It's like the Smurf architecture.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge to just learn that stuff, right? And then I don't want to say it's an obscure technology because as widespread as XML is, even today, when you think about a native XML front end that's entirely coded in XML, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. With any platform that was scaling with the business, there were stability issues. And, I had to wrap that entire platform around my head and then figure out, okay, how do we stabilize it? And first approach is always throw more hardware at it. And because of the way things were configured, too many tenants on a single database instance, I kind of leaned on my shift work experience and put myself on night shift for a week to rebuild the database tier and split up all the tenants in a way that was a little more controlled and allowed us to scale a little bit better.
My only pro XML front end story was there was this Java library that would look at your HTML page that you had built or you had a graphic designer build for you, and you could put in little ID tags on certain components. Like if there's an embedded table, you could be like ID equals revenue table, and then that would show up as a Java class. You could iterate through it, blank it out, start adding rows, and then that would allow you to have the graphic designers separately rev the HTML. And as long as they didn't mess with your little ID attributes, you could just keep changing the UI and the code would work underneath, but never really caught on.
Yeah, and I mean, that's still a problem today with like QA test automation, right? If you key in on the wrong thing and then that thing changes, it breaks your test automation. And so that's still relevant even today.
Good to know that's still a problem 20 years later. So what are you using for version control there? You guys on Git?
Yeah, there was a number of different systems that were in place when I showed up. One of the core parts of the platform was on it wasn't a homegrown system, but it was a system that was designed for that particular database engine. And we wanted to introduce more modern tooling and processes, right? And the build and release processes, get things onto kind of a single way of doing development. If you've got a developer on team A and they've got one set of tooling and a developer on team B and it's a completely different set of tooling and processes, it's hard to move people around. So I think there's a number of reasons for trying to get that stuff under control a little bit better. So yeah, I introduced Git to part of the engineering organization, and Git was actually new to me at the time too. So I had to do a deep dive, figure out, okay, how do we use this with our legacy platform and code base, and then help get the developers on board and help get migrated over to it so we could kind of standardize some of our processes.
You got to follow the consultant's rule there. I need to be 1 to 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Just enough that I can be showing them what to do there in order to get it done.
Exactly.
Now, on the pre-call, we talked a bit about the acronyms. Is it SCADA, SCADA? What does that mean?
Oh, yeah. So that's the energy side of the house. So SCADA is the term, stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. And it's kind of a very specialized industrial control system. So if you think about what National Grid uses to control the grid or the areas of the grid that they're responsible from, that's the SCADA system. And we had one of those at Brookfield, but it could be data acquisition for any number of things.
Thank you so much for joining this Zoom panel interview for our software development position. My apologies for having to reschedule it 7 times.
Hey, no worries. Ready to get this underway.
Let me introduce the panel members from our company. First is...
Whoever that is, can you please mute?
Sorry, that was me. Mailman's here.
Hey, you guys hear me? You see me? My kid is playing Fortnite and my bandwidth is sapped.
Hey, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, this is Connor Walton.
Can everyone who is not talking please mute yourself?
Sorry, so where were we?
Yeah, so the main reason I joined was to let you know that I accepted a job offer from your competitor this morning. Sorry, your process just took too long. Laters.
Does this drill sound all too familiar to you? If so, you should call Searinx. Searinx helps you complete your projects on time and on budget. So stop the Zoom calls and start shipping code today. Call us at 888-579-7469 option 1 or email us at sales@searinx.com. That's sales@syrinx.com.
So you're working at Prism, but a friend of yours reaches out and says, hey, you can take all that software and engineering stuff and combine it with SCADA and come work here.
Yeah, it was really tough for me because I really enjoyed working at Prism, and the people there are fantastic. And, I'm still close with a lot of folks there. So it's hard when an opportunity comes along that could be better, but you don't really know. But I had been working since I got out of the Navy and got back home. I grew up in Boston, and I wasn't able to move back into Boston because I couldn't afford the rent. My job was out in central Mass at the time. So I'd kind of been working towards getting back home, getting back to the city, getting closer to family. And this job was in Back Bay. So, they kind of made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I saw what the opportunity could be there, being a hybrid of, software, startup, and the energy industry. It was too good of a opportunity to turn down. So
what do they have you doing over there?
So this was at Ampion. Initially came in as a systems engineer, more on the monitoring side of things. So there was a monitoring component to the platform, and me being able to bring my expertise to the table in that area was huge. But also just the kind of the operational piece that I had, helping build the team and get some of the operational aspects of what we were doing a little more formalized. That was probably the bulk of my work, introducing, bringing in, Jira and kind of building up some of those processes and just kind of doing a little bit of everything and working with the engineering team.
You had an interesting thing that you did. I think we kind of coined the phrase step down to step up. You're like, okay, I want to go to this other company. Not going to be all egocentric about my title or whatever. I'll take a lower title over there because that's where I want to get to. And I know I'll rise through the ranks once I get there.
Yeah, exactly. Every job I've gone to, I've probably taken a step down and then quickly moved up. And when I was at Brookfield, I was at the top of the food chain for what I was doing on the technical side of things and supporting all of U.S. operations and the SCADA network there. And then, stepping down to a Linux admin and then quickly moving up into cloud infrastructure manager. Same thing at Ampion, taking a sysadmin type of role, to just get my foot in the door. And it quickly grew, and wasn't long. I was put in charge of all of engineering while I was there and helping to build out the entire platform that we were working on.
Now, what's the tech stack look like over there? Are you guys using Rails?
Yeah, it was a Rails shop, which again was new to me. That was probably part of the appeal, as well, because that was a little more cutting edge, I think, than the stuff I had worked on before. But, Rails wasn't the best solution for the monitoring side of things. It just wasn't really meant to handle the data acquisition piece. And so one of the early things that I did was to kind of rebuild and reimagine our data acquisition system and building out a component that would be more of like an IoT type of solution, which again was great because I hadn't done anything with IoT. So let's go figure out how IoT happens, and steep learning curve there when you've got to manage hundreds of devices out in the field with nothing but an internet connection supporting them. So building out that platform had a hardware component to it as well, which was cool. All the software engineers loved working with the hardware, and it was just one of those things where you don't see hardware anymore nowadays. So that part of it was, was fun. And then I leveraged the Elk stack after going through, a number of different options and, again, kind of looking back at tooling that I had used when I was in the energy industry, but it's the entire energy sector is like 20 years behind the times on technology and very slow moving. So a lot of those tools ended up being pretty clunky for what we needed. So being able to design a modern data acquisition platform on a good framework with a cloud API, and then leveraging the Elk stack, providing some visibility into the data internally, and then being able to easily feed data into the Rails app as well.
So out on the IoT devices, you guys are actually using Go compiled down to C?
Yeah, Go's whole ecosystem, which is just fantastic for testing and formatting and static code analysis. So I'm a huge proponent of everything Go, but it's got its purpose and it's got its limitations. Having dove into a little more Python recently, a love for Python now as well. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the devices out in the field, particularly in that industry, are firmware based or C based applications. And, luckily the Go compiler allows you to statically link and compile down to a binary that, if you can run a C based binary, you can run a Go based binary on the device. And it gave me much more flexibility to kind of take a modern development approach to an industry that's somewhat behind the times and kind of bridge the gap between the two.
Now, is this like GCC compiling it down to Linux executables, or?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the other nice thing, is you could specify the OS. So I could run that data acquisition app on Windows or Linux just by setting a different flag in the Go compiler.
That's cool. So what makes you want to eventually move on?
Yeah, that was tough. That was a CTO position and early 30s. And it was a big job, and again, love the people there, and still, I'm still in contact with a lot of them. But I think with any startup, you're trying to find your identity, and there was a kind of a push towards some of the non-technical parts of the business. And so I kind of saw my role kind of being limited with what I'd be able to contribute. So that led me to start looking, see what else was out there.
And how do you get hooked up with the folks at Castellum.ai?
Yeah, it's all who you know, right? Or who you don't know in this instance. So, I was out at kind of an after work event and got introduced to a friend of a friend of a friend, and he said, "Oh, I got a friend of mine that's doing a startup thing, and you should talk to him." And so I met with the two co-founders here, where I'm at now. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy how, can land you a job at a startup. That's a good fit on top of all things.
Now, what does Castellum do in the business space?
Yeah, so we are focusing on making compliance data more available on a global scale. So something as simple as answering the question of, can I do business with this individual in Pakistan, or are they sanctioned? It's actually a hard question to answer for everyday folks or small businesses. There's plenty of systems out there that do this. Again, kind of legacy technology. So we're coming in, we're doing it, kind of faster, better, more flexible, more accessible to the masses.
Who sanctions someone? Is it a country? Is it a state? What sort of things cause you to get sanctioned typically?
Yeah, this is the tough part for me, right? As I keep jumping industries, and every time I go, I was like, software, so you can work anywhere, right? And every time I jump industries, I got to learn about that industry. So it's been a learning curve for me on the financial crime compliance side of the house. But yeah, the data that we bring in, for the most part, it's country by country. So a country has a sanctions program, and they put out their lists of people who are sanctioned. And there are groups, other groups, like the UN, for example, can sanction somebody. So I wouldn't just limit it to a particular country. There's other lists that are out there as well.
So I imagine it's the usual suspects like terrorism and money laundering, but it could be a number of other things too, right?
Yeah, you'd think it would just be the bad folks. But one of the interesting names that came into our database was Ted Cruz. And China actually sanctioned Ted Cruz for, I forget what the specific event was, but it was some type of congressional inquiry into China's internal affairs on something. I don't know. They didn't like it, so they sanctioned them. So if you search our system for Ted Cruz, you'll find Ted Cruz.
So if I'm in China, I am not supposed to do business with Ted Cruz because of this sanction.
Exactly.
Huh. Okay. Too bad for Ted. How else are you data gathering this? Is it like press releases, or where do you figure out where new sanctions are coming from?
Yeah, this is one of the big problems with the industry. And, we're a public benefit corp. And, one of the things we're looking to do is to kind of help make this data more accessible, not necessarily just within our system. The data could come from anywhere, right? So some countries have some pretty structured lists. Some have APIs you could hit. Some have a spreadsheet that they put up on their website. Some have XML docs. It's every format that you could possibly imagine. I mean, the worst ones are the press releases, with like an image or a PDF, inside a press release. Like, we sanctioned these people today. Here's the PDF. And then good luck trying to find that PDF. That's one of 10.
And then you got to scrape it.
Yeah, then you got to scrape. I mean, that's the tricky part. Finding it and then scraping it if it's in PDF, which is probably one of the worst things. There's definitely some handy tools out there for, tables inside of PDF, which is something I get some hands-on experience with, which was interesting to get into that stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's the challenge, right? Is the data is messy, disorganized, distributed all over the place, and getting that into a system that's usable is a big challenge.
So if I'm a little tiny company and I've got nothing, I start using Trello to organize things. Where do I go from there? And like, how do you know how to grow things up?
This is one of the kind of process optimization things that I've taken with me throughout the years. So at Prism, I created a Jira board for my infrastructure team to provide visibility into what we were working on and help with planning. So I got my start as a Jira admin as, one of my side duties. And I've taken that with me. So I think almost every company I've gone to now, I've either, revamped their existing Jira system or introduced Jira, into it. And I want to say I'm not a huge fan of the platform, but it's so widely used. And it's one of those things I can't imagine how I would manage a team or a software project without it nowadays. But yeah, that type of system is great. And it was no surprise that Atlassian, bought Trello. There was just too much overlap there, I think, between what they were doing.
Atlassian should definitely have you on the payroll with all the Jira you've implemented.
Yeah, it's this is one of the big things, right? Was started looking into DevOps, and that became very important to me as an operational philosophy to adopt and understand. And DevOps is very widely misunderstood or misused across the industry, and it got to a point where if somebody had DevOps in a job title, I wouldn't even apply for the job, because to me, that just means they don't understand what DevOps is. But yeah, that's, again, the whole problem of having a problem that you have no control over and no ability to fix is kind of at the root of some of the DevOps principles that are out there. So throwing the code over the fence to QA and QA throwing it over the wall to the ops team. I've felt those pains, at all parts of those processes. And, using a tool like Jira and getting everybody visibility into the end-to-end process, even all the way, on the business side of things, as well as the dev teams, and allowing the devs to see the work that the ops team's doing, and getting everybody on that same platform has helped me kind of promote those types of practices.
So you can't be on the keyboard all the time. What do you do when you get out of the office?
I stay busy. No, I do a lot of sport activities. So I played volleyball in high school and didn't have too much opportunity to do that, when I was in the Navy, but I'm sure I could probably recreate some Top Gun scenes.
I was going to say, did they lie to me? Like, I thought that's all they did with their free time.
Yeah, me and a buddy, and we played doubles volleyball on the beach when I was stationed down south. So did a little bit of that. And yeah, I play volleyball a lot now. So every kind of format that's available for that. More recently got into rock climbing. I haven't done too much outdoor yet, so a lot of gym time, but that helped me in my other sports, including golf, which was surprising that balance and strength help you in golf.
So Chris is probably too humble to mention it, but his shoulders are a little tired from carrying our foursome in the recent Syrinx golf tournament that we had.
You just caught me on a good day, I think.
Very good. So, Chris, thank you very much for coming down to join us and sharing your experiences and stories on Underserved.
Thanks, Andrew. This has been great.
And we'll talk to everyone soon on the next episode of Underserved.
Thank you for listening to the Underserved podcast. For more information on the topics discussed and for show notes, visit the show website, underserved.fm. And please be sure to rate, like, and subscribe to Underserved on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.